Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of AARP Massachusetts Fraud Talk Tuesdays. We are here on the second Tuesday of every month from 12 to 12:30, where we discuss different scams and how you can protect yourself and your family from becoming a victim. Today's topic is AARP Fraud Watch Network Helpline and virtual support groups. My name is Jim Carney. I am a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts. And our presenter today is Alice Diamond, who's also a volunteer with Mass AARP and with the Fraud Watch Network Helpline. You may have joined us today with questions already in mind. If you have, please put them into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, or if questions come up during the presentation, put them into the Q&A. We will be monitoring this as we go along. This session is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of this recording to share with family and friends. And at the end of the presentation, we will share a page with links to phone numbers or websites of other resources that we will be mentioning throughout the presentation. So let's get started. Alice, what is the AARP Fraud Watch Network?
So the Fraud Watch Network is a nationwide initiative to help people navigate frauds and scams. And the initiative basically has two programs. One is fraud prevention, which is information to empower consumers to help them take preventive action against frauds and scams. AARP also works on advocacy to create more victim supporting changes. And the second is fraud victim support, and that's the volunteer-based helpline with offices in Denver and Seattle. And volunteers work remotely throughout the country and assist individuals one-on-one. And we also provide online support group for those who have been victimized.
What is the Fraud Watch Network Helpline?
Well, it's the greatest volunteer opportunity I think that anyone could have. But before I talk about the volunteer point of view, I'll talk about the consumer point of view. It's a free resource available to anyone, regardless of age or regardless of whether or not you're an AARP member. Trained volunteers provide telephone support and guidance on what to do if you think you may have been victimized by scammers, and also on how to avoid scams in the future. We also provide support to family members or friends of those who may have been victimized by scammers. And we'll give the phone number for the fraud helpline at the end of the presentation, but I'll say it right now in case anybody has an emergency that they need to call in about. The number is 877-908-3360.
What drew you to becoming a volunteer on the Fraud Watch Helpline?
Last summer, I retired from my position directing a university career center, and the number of scam job postings that we received was just incredible. And I saw the devastating impact that scams have on people. And I wanted to find a way to join with others to fight fraud. So to become a Fraud Watch Network volunteers involves extensive training up front, and then we also get training and updated information throughout the year, because, as you're not surprised to know, new scams are constantly evolving. Each week, I call individuals who have called in on the helpline, and it's been one of the most moving and rewarding volunteer experiences I've ever had.
Great. So what happens if I call the Fraud Watch Helpline?
Well, some basic information. Calls are answered from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, Eastern time, Monday through Friday. So what happens is you'll get a call center representative from AARP who will ask some basic questions about your situation and what's happened. And then you get a call back from one of the trained AARP fraud volunteer specialists. And most calls are returned within 24 to 48 hours. And just to give you a sense of the scope of the operation, we receive about 400 calls a day.
So what will happen when the fraud specialist calls?
Okay. The timing is perfect for this talk because I'm starting a Fraud Watch Network shift at 1 p.m. today. So our focus is to provide both resources and support. So for some callers, reaching out to the helpline is the first time that they've shared their experience with anyone. We listen and we provide information on next steps that the caller can take. Obviously, it's very upsetting to be victimized by scammers. And I've found that when individuals are able to take steps to protect themselves, they feel empowered. Also, connecting with a trained volunteer with expertise in fraud, scams, and financial exploitation who can both empathize with the caller and provide a kind of clear and kind reality check often really helps people move forward. It also provides an anonymous way for a person to ask about fraud and scams and can help reduce some of the stigma associated with reporting these incidents. And I think one of the most important things that we do is that we meet the individual where they are emotionally and support them to feel reassured at a time when they feel vulnerable and violated. And sometimes it's hard to share these experiences with friends and family because people are embarrassed. They feel like people are going to say, how could you be so gullible? So the Fraud Helpline is a place for people to come and really get support.
Right. So what are examples of steps that you may suggest for victims of fraud?
So I have so many examples, but I'm going to try to keep them to just a few. One of the most frequent calls that we get is about identity theft. And scammers use very clever and sophisticated methods to get people to share personal information, often impersonating a well-known business or bank or organization. And so if someone has shared personal information, such as a social security number or bank information, one of the most important things is that they act very quickly. And in fact, when people call into the fraud helpline, the call center people will give the sort of emergency information, the things that people can do even before we call them back. But one of the things you want to do immediately is contact your bank. And I'm going to tell you, use the number on the back of your bank card. Do not use the number that you received in an email or any information provided to you by the scammer. We're going to recommend that you contact the credit reporting agencies, and I'm going to have a slide that will show you with their phone numbers at the end of this talk, because you can put a credit alert or a freeze on your account, and that means that no one will be able to take out a credit card in your name or a cell phone or a loan. Just a couple more. One of the most frequent calls we get is the computer virus scam. You know, you're working on your computer and you get this terrible noise and a scary sound and your screen goes black and you get a message. It often looks like it's from Microsoft telling you that you need to do something because your computer's been compromised. Ironically, what you think you're doing to something to keep you from being scammed, and that's the scam. So one of the challenges is if you do click on the links, you may allow access to your computer, which means your financial information, your passwords, anything that's on your computer can be taken by the scammers. Also, they can put a virus into your computer. So one of the first things we tell people to do, get your computer, first turn off the computer, take a deep breath, get your computer cleaned at a local reputable organization, or go in person to a Geek Squad at Best Buy. Just one point, don't just Google Geek Squad, because I guarantee you a significant percent of the links that come up are going to be to scams. If I talk to one more person on the helpline who says, well, I Googled it, as if anyone, I mean, there's a fraud team at Google who is constantly working to reduce the number of scam links, but it's filled with scams. And then you immediately want to change all your passwords, including those for email, Amazon, any other accounts that are on there. And finally, we recommend that you file a non-emergency police report and also report the scam to the Federal Trade Commission.
Are there any calls that are particularly memorable?
Oh my gosh, all I can say is so many of them are, and for so many reasons. I'm going to start with mentioning romance scams, partly because often the call comes from a loved one or a family member of the person who either isn't willing or in some cases isn't able to recognize that they're engaged in a scam. And even when the call is from someone who has come to realize that they're scammed, it is very devastating because often there's a significant financial loss. And also the person is experiencing the loss of the relationship that they thought they were in. I've spoken to people who have lost very large sums of money to romance scams. And sometimes there's sort of the combo scam. So you're in a romance scam, you think you're in a relationship with someone who's giving you tips on how to invest cryptocurrency, and it's both parts of it are a scam. I spoke with someone who lost $150,000 in a romance scam that lasted over a year. And when she called the Fraud Watch Network, it was the first time she had told anyone about it. And it was a real, I think it was a real pivotal moment for her. And I think, just the sense of embarrassment and shame and vulnerability. These scammers are really creating a great deal of havoc in people's lives.
Are there types of people that are more likely to be scammed than, say, normal people?
One thing I can say, in my time as a helpline volunteer, I have talked to people from their teens to their 90s, from literally all walks of life. Some people have lost really large sums of money, and even for those who haven't lost money, or even just a little bit, the sense of violation and being taken advantage of is really difficult. We often say at the Fraud Watch Helpline, it's not who you are, it's how you are at the moment of the scam. And I can tell you, I've talked to some really savvy people, just people you can tell. They're smart, they know what they're doing, they have it together. They knew about many scams. They just didn't know about the specific scam that they were targeted for. So they might have let their guard down for 1 minute, or they rushed to respond to a Facebook Messenger from someone that they really thought was a good friend. When they interview scammers and ask them, what do you do and how do you do it? They use the phrase under the ether. The ether is a heightened emotional state when all of us are more vulnerable to being scammed. And sometimes it can last just a moment or two. And we can be under the ether because we're upset, like the grandparent scam, where you hear that your grandchild is having some terrible crisis and you need to send money right away, or any other scam that's frightening or upsetting or distressing. But the other scams that are very effective are the ones where we get excited. So it's not just upset. Your emotions can go in the other direction. You think you won a lottery, sweepstakes. One reason job scams are so effective is you've been job searching for a while. You hear from an employer that you're being invited for an interview. You get really excited and you're going along the whole process. You think you're getting hired. And it turns out that those forms they gave you were fake. And next thing you know, not only don't you have a job, but you've had your identity stolen. The other thing is that many people feel embarrassed that they were victimized by scammers. They blame themselves. And so one of the things we do on the Fraud Watch Helpline, and we really try to do this in every call, is to let people know that they were victims of a crime. and that today's scammers are often sophisticated criminals working in organized groups, and they've refined and developed their techniques with years of practice. I believe that there's a scam for every person. One of my family members was scammed, so I know it can happen to anyone. If you hear about a scam, don't blame the victim. They were victimized by true criminals.
Okay, that's some great experiences you have. So what suggestions do you have as a result of your work on the Fraud Watch Helpline?
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it brief because I have too many. Everybody needs to be aware that scammers are impersonating businesses and organizations. Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Microsoft, bank, retail companies, etc. I believe that there is a whole industry of web designers and graphic designers and user experience experts that are creating fake websites and fake materials, and the stuff looks exactly the same as the legitimate company. So basically, if anyone contacts you from any organization, any business, independently contact them. So that includes text message, email, links. One thing is that the scammers they know that people are being told don't click on links. I actually had a call a couple of weeks ago where someone got a hard copy letter from Bank of America telling her about an old account that was sitting and hadn't been used in years. And it looked completely legit. It had the logo, and she unfortunately called the number on the letter because she thought, well, hard copy letter that's going to be legit. And unfortunately, it was a scam. So just remember, independently contact businesses. Second tip is scammers are often impersonating government agencies, Social Security, IRS, Medicare. One tip, if you hear the word government grant, I want you to automatically think scam. If I tell you how many people called into the helpline because they thought they were applying for a government grant, I'm not going to tell you there's literally no government grants, but my experience is there's very few of them that are legit. And again, if you think there's a government grant, contact that government agency independently. I mentioned some of the other scams: fraudulent sales, fraudulent investments. I talked about the Google searches not always leading to legitimate sites. The telephone, I've got to say, I advise people to not answer the telephone. Let your phone go to voicemail. If you don't recognize the number, be especially careful. And be aware that scammers can spoof calls, so they can make the caller ID look like it's coming from somewhere that you recognize. And just to know that for seniors, the telephone is the most frequent contact method used by scammers. And I know from my work on the Fraud Watch Helpline, it's very hard for people who grew up answering the phone all their life to not answer the phone. But I'm going to tell you, if you could just let it go to voicemail, you're going to save yourself potential scams. And just a couple more tips. If you hear gift card equals scam, what I mean by that is if anybody asks you to pay for something with a gift card, automatically think scam. I mean, I can't even walk past the gift card display in a store without thinking scam, because pretty much a huge percent of people who I call on the Fraud Watch Helpline have lost money by buying gift cards and giving the numbers to scammers. And just be aware, any money that you send via wire, the peer-to-peer payment apps, Zelle, Venmo, Cash App, much of the time when you use those, the money's gone. I am glad to know that some retailers are starting to offer a service where if you contact them very quickly, you may be able to get the gift card, if the gift card ended, stopped, if you know that it's a scam. Be really cautious on social media. Be especially cautious of ads you see. You see this ad on Facebook, whatever the product is, it looks like it's going to make your life perfect. A huge percent of those are scams. And be really careful about accepting friends on social media. And if you're job searching, be aware that there's an epidemic of job search scams.
Okay, so what kinds of support groups are offered to victims of scams?
I've got to say, if anyone has been victimized by scammers or knows someone who has, please encourage them to participate in one of the AARP Fraud Watch Network support groups. It's called AARP VOAREST, which stands for Resilience, Strength, and Time. And what these are online groups. They're held Monday through Thursday, different times of the day. They're led by a trained facilitator. And these are hour-long discussions where people talk about their experiences, reestablish trust, and kind of gain their footing after a difficult experience. Family members are welcome to join. I sat in on one of the support groups, and I have to say it was one of the most powerful experiences I could imagine. A couple people in one of the groups had lost $1 million each. So if you know anyone who's been victimized by scammers, encourage them to participate in them. I'm going to show a slide at the end, which will be information on how to participate in all of these experiences.
All right. So kind of summarizing, what can someone do if they or a loved one has fallen victim to a scam?
Call the Fraud Watch Helpline number at 877-908-3360. Don't blame yourself. You were a victim of a crime. And file a non-emergency police report. Scammers are criminals and need to be reported. And the more that are reported, the more effective methods to combat fraud will be.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think one of the best things those who attended today is when you're with friends and family, bring up the topic of scams. Share what you learned today. As part of the Speakers Bureau, we go out and talk about fraud. And I used to start my talks by giving a long list of all the different kinds of scams. Now I just say, has anybody experienced a scam? And pretty much in any room, half the people have either had an attempt or a successful scam. So talking about it is really, really powerful. Bring it up, share it with people. And I think you can help to get the word out because, we need a lot of grassroots level work to be able to fight the scammers. I really believe that information is power.
Alice, we have a few questions that have come in.
Sure.
Francis asks, is there a time limit for reporting a scam?
There is not. I'm going to encourage anybody to try to report it sooner rather than later. But I've had people call into the Fraud Watch Helpline with things that happened long ago, and we still go through the steps of what you can do. For some of these things, the longer you wait, the worse it can get. You didn't report it, and then 3 years later, you went to file for unemployment. You didn't report identity theft. And 3 years later, you go to file for unemployment and you find out you're already on unemployment. That means somebody else got your unemployment checks.
Joanne asks, why isn't more being done to bring this into the national spotlight? Unfortunately, people are victimized and have no knowledge that these fraudsters exist.
Yes, I agree 100% with you. I do have to say that in the training we get at AARP, the folks that run the AARP Fraud Watch Network do work closely with the Federal Trade Commission, with the Attorney General's office. And there needs to be a lot of work at the policy level, the education level. I agree 100% with you.
And Mary got an interesting thing in the mail. She says, "Do you think businesses should send postcards to a home and sign? You have you sign your name and send the card back with no envelope. I received one to request an application for a mail-in ballot from the city election committee. So you're sending a card out with all your information on it, but not in an envelope."
No, put it in an envelope. And let me give you one more tip. Don't just go put it in a physical mailbox, even the kind that has the really narrow slit so only one letter can go in, because there was issues with the master key for mailboxes being stolen. Dennis, what's the name of that master key?
It's called an arrow key, and it's
the arrow key.
There's an arrow key, that goes with a certain number of zip codes.
Right. So what I do is walk into the lobby of the post office with that postcard in the envelope, sealed, and put it in the slot. The other thing is, if anything you can avoid mailing is a good thing. So if you can pay bills online, etc. But that was a good job noticing the possibility of identity theft from putting something on a postcard.
I have one other comment, is that we should share this information with everybody because, younger people are more likely to be scammed. They just have less money to steal.
Exactly. Really good point. Yeah. I mean, it's true that seniors lose the most money because they have more money, but the younger people are more frequently, yes, the demographics of it. Let me also mention one more number. It was reported that just over $8 billion was lost to scammers last year. And I participated in a training session with the Federal Trade Commission where their researchers estimated that only 5% of scams are reported. So I'm not a human calculator, but do the arithmetic of what 8 billion is 5% of. That's a scary number. And Dennis is showing online the link for the fraud support groups. It's just aarp.org/fraud support. Click on register. And the number for the helpline, if you suspect a scam, 877-908-3360. And this is the number for the credit bureaus. I encourage everyone at a minimum to put a credit alert on your account. What that means is if anyone tries to open up a cell phone or an account in your name, the company is required to confirm it with you. The alternative is a credit freeze. And either one is a really good way to protect yourself. And these are the numbers. If you're doing an alert, you only have to call one of the 3 numbers of the credit agencies. They'll report it to the other 2.
And you can do it also online. But as Alice said, if you Google Experian or Equifax or TransUnion, make sure that you're going to their site and not some bogus site.
I also tell people dial this number really carefully because there's no doubt in my mind that scammers have probably tried to get the phone numbers of the numbers that are exactly like this, but just off by 1 digit.
And if you don't happen to have a pencil and paper with you right now, we're going to send you these slides after the presentation along with the recording.
All right, so our time is just about up, and I want to thank you, Alice, for sharing your insight and experience, which has been very helpful, I'm sure.
We have one more comment.
Okay.
It's an observation that she says, my friend was recently scammed by going online to buy concert tickets. That's a big one, I think. Seems that these scams are on the rise.
Yes.
How else can people buy tickets if there's no other option?
There's a great episode on The Perfect Scam, which is a podcast, which was the new one that just came out a couple of weeks ago, all about concert tickets. Listen to that. It's called The Perfect Scam. You'll get the answer to that question.
And that's available on the Fraud Watch Network under podcasts. I think it's called The Perfect Scam.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us today. Jim, any final comments?
No, I just wanted to remind everyone that next month will be on October 10th at 12 to 12:30, and our topic will be protecting you and your family from identity theft. So we hope to see you then.